Osgood. Kemba, and it's carrying away. Osgood. 1-0. And only players like Osgood take goals like that.
Ron Harris once made a remarkable claim. Among all the players he had seen at Chelsea, Peter Osgood stood above the rest. That opinion alone would be interesting, but Harris was not the only one. The deeper you look into Osgood's career, the more respected football voices you find praising him. Managers admired him, teammates respected him, football writers celebrated him. Even some of Europe's most respected football minds believed he possessed something special, and that is where the mystery begins. These were not supporters in the stands. These were men who spent their lives around elite football, men who recognised talent for a living. Yet again and again, they spoke about Peter Osgood differently, as if he belonged in a category of his own. The strange part is what happened next. For all the praise he received, for all the admiration he earned, for all the respect shown by football people, England never truly made him one of its central figures. That leaves an important question. What exactly did these football greats see in Peter Osgood? Why did so many respected voices speak about him with such admiration? And why are those opinions still remembered today? To answer that, we need to begin with the men who recognised his talent long before the rest of football caught up. Subscribe, because football's greatest names often saw greatness long before everyone else did. Not everyone who watched Peter Osgood agreed on everything, but one thing appeared again and again. The people who saw him up close recognised his talent very quickly. Roy Bentley was one of them. That matters because Bentley was not an ordinary observer. He was one of Chelsea's most respected figures, a league-winning captain, a man who had spent years around top footballers. So when he spoke about Peter Osgood, people listened. Years later, Bentley admitted that you did not need to know much about football to see Osgood had something special. It is a simple quote, but it says a lot. Bentley was not talking about trophies. He was not talking about statistics. He was talking about pure ability. Something that stood out immediately. Something obvious. That opinion becomes even more interesting when you consider what happened later. As Osgood's reputation grew, more and more respected football figures started saying similar things. Different people, different backgrounds, yet many arrived at the same conclusion. There was a natural quality to Osgood's game that separated him from most players. A confidence that could not be taught. A presence that drew attention. An ability to make difficult things look effortless. Bentley's comments are important because they came before the fame, before the King of Stamford Bridge nickname, before the Great Cup finals, before the legendary status. He was talking about Peter Osgood, the footballer, not Peter Osgood, the icon. And Bentley was only the beginning. Soon, another influential figure inside Chelsea would make an even stronger case for Osgood's greatness. This time, the praise would come from the manager, who worked with him every day. Roy Bentley was not the only respected football man impressed by Peter Osgood. Tommy Docherty saw even more. Unlike Bentley, Docherty worked with Osgood every day. He saw him in training. He saw him under pressure. He saw the things supporters never saw, and what he saw convinced him that Osgood was a rare talent. Years later, Docherty described him as quick, skillful, brave, strong in the air, and blessed with 2 excellent feet. That is an extraordinary description. Most forwards have 1 or 2 outstanding qualities. Docherty was describing almost everything: pace, technique, courage, aerial ability, versatility. The picture he painted was of a complete footballer. That helps explain why Osgood made such a strong impression on football people. Different people admired different parts of his game. Some saw the skill, others saw the goals, others saw the confidence. Docherty saw all of it, and he understood something else. Osgood was not a player who disappeared in big moments. The bigger the occasion, the more comfortable he seemed. That combination of ability and personality made him stand out. It also explains why his reputation spread so quickly. Because once respected football figures started discussing Peter Osgood, they were no longer talking about a promising player. They were talking about someone they believed could become one of England's finest. And before long, that belief would spread beyond Chelsea. Tommy Docherty was a respected football figure, but the next voice carried weight far beyond Chelsea. His name was Nils Liedholm, one of the great figures of European football, a man admired for both his playing career and his football intelligence. When Liedholm looked at Peter Osgood, he made a remarkable prediction. He believed Osgood would become the star of England's national team. That was not praise from a teammate, or loyalty from a Chelsea man. It was the opinion of one of football's most respected minds. And it tells us something important. By this stage, Osgood's reputation had moved beyond Stamford Bridge. People outside Chelsea were noticing him too. The interesting part is not that Liedholm admired him. Many people did. The interesting part is how highly he rated him. He did not see a useful England player. He did not see a future squad member. He saw a future star. That is a very different level of expectation. And when you look at the football voices we have heard so far, a pattern begins to emerge. Roy Bentley saw something special. Tommy Docherty saw a complete footballer. Now Nils Liedholm was talking about England's future star. Different men, different backgrounds, yet the same conclusion. Peter Osgood was a rare talent, which makes what happened next even harder to understand, because the future many expected never fully arrived. The more praise Peter Osgood received, the bigger the expectations became. That was only natural. When respected football figures speak about a player in those terms, people start expecting greatness. So, this Skjessen's not just a good career, a special one, and for a time, that seemed exactly where Osgood was heading. The opinions of Bentley, Docherty, and Liedholm, if anything, they looked justified. But football careers rarely follow a perfect path. Sometimes a single moment changes everything. For Osgood, that moment came early. A serious leg injury stopped his progress and kept him out of the game for a long period. Years later, Osgood himself admitted he had been partly responsible. The injury eventually healed, but many believe the player who returned was different. Still talented, still admired, but different. It is one of the great what-ifs surrounding his career. How much more could he have achieved without that setback? Would England have viewed him differently? Would the predictions have become reality? Nobody can answer those questions, but they never completely disappeared. What makes Osgood's story unusual is that the admiration never disappeared either. Even after the injury, even after the setbacks, football people continued speaking about him with enormous respect, and some of the strongest praise would come from the men who shared a dressing room with him. Many people admired Peter Osgood, but few opinions carried more weight than Ron Harris. Harris was not speaking as a supporter. He was speaking as a teammate, a captain, a man who shared the dressing room with Osgood for years. That is why one particular comment stands out. Years after Osgood's playing career had ended, Harris was asked about Chelsea's greatest players. The club had produced countless legends by then, yet Harris remained convinced that Peter Osgood stood above them all. He even said that while many people would choose Gianfranco Zola, his choice would always be Peter Osgood. That is extraordinary praise. Not because Zola was a poor player, quite the opposite. Zola is widely regarded as one of the finest footballers Chelsea has ever had, yet Harris still chose Osgood, and he never seemed to waver from that opinion. Perhaps that tells us something important. The people who played alongside Peter Osgood saw qualities that statistics cannot fully capture. They saw the personality, the confidence, the influence he carried within the team, the ability to make an occasion feel bigger whenever he was involved. To supporters, he was the king of Stamford Bridge. To Ron Harris, he was something even simpler, the greatest player Chelsea had ever produced. And Harris was not the only former teammate who remembered Osgood in those terms. Others would also speak about his influence, his presence, and the lasting impression he left behind. Ron Harris was not the only former teammate who remembered Peter Osgood with admiration. Others spoke about qualities that could not be measured on a score sheet. David Webb was one of them. When Webb reflected on Osgood, he did not focus only on goals or famous matches. He spoke about character, presence, influence, the kind of qualities every successful dressing room needs. According to Webb, Osgood could be intimidating at times, but he also believed that strength helped the team. Players knew where they stood. People listened when Osgood spoke. That is a very different image from the one many supporters remember. The long hair, the swagger, the confidence, the celebrity lifestyle. Behind that image was someone teammates respected, someone whose influence reached beyond the pitch. And perhaps that explains why Osgood remained such a powerful figure inside Chelsea long after his playing days ended, because the people closest to him were not remembering a public image. They were remembering the person they knew. Again and again, former teammates described a footballer who left a lasting impression, not simply because of what he achieved, but because of who he was. By now, a pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. Ron Harris saw greatness. David Webb saw leadership. Others saw personality and presence. And outside Chelsea, respected football figures had already spoken about his talent. The evidence kept building. Yet there was one group whose connection to Peter Osgood went even deeper than his teammates. The supporters who turned him into a football king. Football clubs have legends. Very few have kings. Yet that is exactly what Peter Osgood became. The king of Stamford Bridge. Supporters did not give him that title by accident, and they certainly did not give it to many others. What made the connection so unusual was its strength. Decades passed. Managers came and went. Players came and went. Chelsea changed beyond recognition. Yet Osgood's place in the hearts of supporters never seemed to fade. Former teammate Bobby Tambling once recalled how much Osgood cared about the fans. He remembered him making sure supporters were looked after whenever possible. Small gestures perhaps, but ones people never forgot. Others remembered the same thing. Osgood understood supporters. He enjoyed being around them, and they responded in return. That relationship became one of the defining parts of his legacy. Many footballers are admired. Some are respected. A few are loved. Peter Osgood reached another level. He became part of Chelsea's identity. That is why supporters still sing his name. That is why a statue stands outside Stamford Bridge. That is why new generations continue hearing about him long after his final match. Because for Chelsea supporters, Peter Osgood was never just another great player. He was their king. And while Chelsea fans never stopped believing in him, the same could not be said for England. By the time Peter Osgood reached his peak, people inside football were no longer the only ones talking about him. Television audiences were seeing it too, and few voices carried more authority in British sport than David Coleman. Coleman had seen the greatest players, the biggest matches, the finest goals, so his reaction to one famous Osgood moment is worth remembering. After Osgood scored a brilliant volley against Arsenal, Coleman delivered a line that captured exactly how many people viewed him. Only players like Osgood take goals like that.
Only players like Osgood take goals like that.
It is a short quote, but it says everything. Coleman was not talking about an ordinary footballer. He was talking about a player capable of producing moments most others could not. That is why Peter Osgood remained such a memorable figure. Not because people felt sorry for him, not because of nostalgia, because respected football people genuinely believed they were watching someone special. The more you examine the opinions left behind, the clearer the picture becomes. Again and again, football's biggest names spoke about Peter Osgood with admiration, not just for his goals, not just for his talent, but for the impression he left on those around him. Perhaps that is his real legacy. Long after the matches ended, the people who knew football best never stopped talking about him. And maybe that explains why the King of Stamford Bridge is still remembered today, not simply as a Chelsea legend, but as one of the most gifted and fascinating footballers of his generation. Subscribe, because football's biggest names often reveal truths that statistics never can.